Hi guys, this is Mrs. Anderson doing section 4 of chapter 17, The Rise of Austria and Prussia in the Age of Absolutism. Just as a little bit of background, please remember the first Holy Roman Emperor was Charlemagne, crowned by Pope Leo III on Christmas Day, 800 AD. They did an awful lot of important things like that on Christmas Day. Charlemagne helped the Pope against rebellious nobles in Rome and was thus made an emperor. By the time of 1618, the Holy Roman Emperor will not be crowned by the Pope. The Holy Roman Empire will be ruled by Emperor Matthias, who was now elected by 7 leading German princes. The emperor was not in a very strong position at all. The empire was made up of several hundred small separate states, and pretty much the emperor did not have very much control over them. More background. If you remember, at the time of Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation, the princes of the different regions had control over the religion of their subjects. For the most part, the northern region was Protestant and the southern region was Catholic. At this point in history, however, this is an oversimplification, as Protestantism had branched out from just Lutheranism and they all fought each other. The political and religious problems of the day will erupt into what we call the 30 Years' War. Here are 2 maps of Austria and Prussia. I'm sure you can find better ones on your iPad. Okay, the war begins. The 30 Years' War from 1618 to 1648, constant religious conflict in Germany with all of those states. Germany is a part of the Holy Roman Empire, however, the emperor can't do much. By the time of the Age of Absolutism, and this is a quote, the empire was no longer holy nor Roman. Okay, King Ferdinand of the Austrian Habsburgs wants to suppress the Protestants and control his nobles. He basically wants to roll back the Protestant Reformation. That's not going to happen. The Habsburgs were a royal family who ruled for 600 years. Some previous Habsburgs you may know, Charles V was a Holy Roman Emperor. He was also Charles I of Spain, member of the Habsburg family. In 1618, let's start this war. Rebellious nobles tossed 2 royal officials out of a window in Prague. Important to note, those nobles were Protestant. This began a general revolt called the Second Defenestration of Prague. Second defenestration, meaning they threw more people out of the window in Prague previous to this. The revolt started out as a religious revolt. It will end on a political base. No longer religious. European nations will go to war. These are the combatants of the 30 Years' War. Please notice it is an all-European war. The results. War will lead to depopulation of Europe. It is estimated that a total of 1/3 of the population of the German states will perish. They not only will be wiped out because of the war itself, but because of disease and famine which come with the war. The Peace of Westphalia will end the 30 Years' War. The general European peace basically acknowledges they have problems. They will agree to work together to solve other international policies. Germany will be divided into 360 fragmented states. They will recognize the Holy Roman Emperor, but they will all have their own church, their own government, their own army, etc. In the Peace of Westphalia, France will win major territory. The Habsburgs in Austria will be the big losers. The German princes are almost totally independent of the Holy Roman Empire. It will not be until 1871 when Germany will unite, and they will unite under a strong Prussia, We will learn that in world history too. The Netherlands and the Swiss Federation were granted independence in the Peace of Westphalia. Now the Habsburgs, they will keep the title of Holy Roman Emperor, but they will concentrate on ruling their land in Austria. They will also add the following lands: Bohemia, Hungary, and parts of Poland and Italy. It will be difficult to rule this empire because of the diverseness of the population. They will have Germans and Magyars and Slavs. These people all have their own language, laws, and customs. They all are going to want to rule themselves. Thus, we are going to learn about World War I. That comes at the end of the semester. The Habsburgs, despite having an empire, never have a central government to control it. Now we're going to look, this is another map that you can get a better map on your iPad. Now we're going to look at Maria Theresa. Maria Theresa was the only woman ruler in the 650-year history of the Habsburg dynasty. Remember, they never wanted a woman on the throne. Reasons for that, and probably the primary reason for that, is they didn't want her husband to be able to take control of the country. Maria Theresa was one of the most successful Habsburg rulers, either male or female, while bearing 16 children between 1738 and 1756. That's quite an accomplishment. Please just take my word for that. When Maria Theresa's father realized that his daughter had to take control upon his death, he wrote the Pragmatic Sanction, which guaranteed her the throne. He had the ruling European families look at it and agree to it. However, it will take the War of the Austrian Succession to ultimately guarantee she would keep the throne. So the War of the Austrian Succession, primarily against Frederick II of Prussia. The Archduchess was determined that her internal and external policies would focus on the strengthening of her state and the creation of positive diplomacy in order to defeat the Prussian monarch. She was determined not to surrender to her enemies, but to reconquer all of her lands. She began initiating reforms. Maria Theresa strengthened the army by doubling the number of troops. She reorganized the tax structure to ensure a predictable annual income to pay for that army, and she centralized an office to assist in the collection of taxes. Economic reform fueled prosperity for her empire. She took care of domestic policy. She figured out the army situation. Then she went to war, probably why she is one of the best Habsburg rulers. The war ended with the loss of Silesia, but her state was intact and her husband was recognized as Holy Roman Emperor Francis I. As time went on, she tried to ease the burden of taxes and labor services on serfs, so she thought about her people, making her a good monarch. The rise of Prussia. After the Peace of Westphalia, the Hohenzollern family, the kings of Prussia, united their lands, created an efficient central bureaucracy like the Habsburgs, and reduced the independence of their nobles, the Junkers. They didn't want their nobles to be able to take control. They retained the loyalty of the Junkers by giving them positions in the army and the government. Please, when you think of Prussia, always think militarism. For the next semester, we're going to see the rise of Prussia as a great power. Prussia will unite Germany. They will become more of a military state. If Prussia is involved in the war, chances are Prussia will win. Frederick William I developed a well-trained army, and in a quote from him, Prussia is not a state which possesses an army, but an army which possesses a state. Now, in the War of the Austrian Succession, we're dealing with Frederick William's son, Frederick II, who as a child wanted nothing to do with the military or with ruling. However, he will become known as Frederick the Great. Frederick II of Prussia in 1740 used his army to invade Silesia, which is a Habsburg territory, eventually claiming it for Prussia. Because of his military prowess, Frederick II is known as Frederick the Great. All right, now, keeping the balance of power. The European powers all want to keep their own control. They have to organize with each other to make sure no one power takes over. This is the goal. It's going to be the goal throughout the 19th century. The great powers of Europe are Austria, Prussia, France, England, and Russia. They will form alliances to keep the balance of power, but two great rivalries will rise up. Prussia and Austria will fight over control of the German states. Ultimately, Prussia will win. England and France will fight over an overseas empire. Ultimately, at the end of world history too, England and France will be allies fighting against Germany in World War I. Now, there is another war that we'll touch on very, very briefly. From 1756 to 1763, there is something called the 7 Years' War. If you're learning United States history, we would call this the French and Indian War. That's the part that took place in North America. This war will be fought over 4 continents. It will end in the Treaty of Paris, and Great Britain will have a huge empire because of the 7 Years' War. Now, just another aside, the Treaty of Paris, they always name treaties after the city in which they are signed. There are so many treaties signed in Paris that when in doubt, on a test question, what's the name of this treaty? Treaty of Paris, 9 times out of 10, you'll be correct. Thank you very much for listening. Please enjoy World History 2.